Thank you for that introduction. This is a very different stage than my ballet life. But oh, what a wonderful surprise earlier today. Did anyone else see the Royal Danish Ballet, the Swan Lake pas de deux? Oh, I was just, amazing, amazing. Wow, what talent. To start off my talk with you today, I would like to ask you a question, and that question is, would you be willing to share your email address to a stranger on the street? Softball question to start, probably yes, we effectively do this all the time, right? Well, what about your fingerprints? It's a little weird, like I'm talking a full set of fingerprints. Would you be willing to reveal this to a stranger standing on the street? Well, in 2014, New York-based artist Risa Puno set up a cookie stand. The twist was that instead of selling the cookies in exchange for money, she sold them in exchange for personal information. So if you wanted one of these delicious-looking cookies, there's Risa and her stand, you would fill out a form, and the form had, here are the cookies, the form had all kinds of questions it would ask you. So it would ask you, for example, your email address, that gets you a couple points, your full driver's license, that gets you more points, full set of fingerprints, that gives you 5 whole points. So you amass enough points, and you get yourself a cookie. Now, while you're deciding whether to give up your personal information in exchange for one of these delicious-looking cookies, let me show you the form. Here is the form. Here is its fine print. And I'm going to help you out a little bit. I'm going to turn the form over so that we can, and I'm going to enlarge it. And here are some excerpts from that form. Essentially, your secrets, they're not safe with Risa. And another excerpt, she's not responsible for any problems you might experience as a consequence of having revealed your personal information. So by the end of the day, how many people do you think revealed their personal information enough to get a cookie? She's got this cookie stand. How many people do you think did this by the end of the day? How many cookies do you think she effectively sold? 200, 300, 1,000. It's like an auction here. I'll tell you the answer. The answer is 380. She sold 380 cookies. Now, my question to you, 380 cookies, is that a lot? Is that a little? Is that too many? Is that too few? Well, my own answer to this question has changed dramatically over the years. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have said, this is way too many. I've spoken and stood in front of thousands of people using this very example to say just how way too forthcoming we are with our information. Like, look at these idiots. They're giving out their social security number, super important in the US, their fingerprints. They're giving out all this information in exchange for a trivial reward, like a cookie. And so my thesis used to be, we overshare all the time. But I've come to believe that I've had it wrong. And what I'd like for us to explore in our time together is the idea that there's something deeply right about what these 380 people did. And that maybe, just maybe, even more people should be sharing their information. Now let's start with a little thought experiment. I'd like you to imagine that you are introducing yourselves to a crop of new hires, so promising new talent, and you're their leader, so presumably you want them to like you want them to be motivated, you want them to respect you. So just think to yourself for a moment, what would you say to introduce yourself to this group? Give you a moment to think about that. Now, we've done lots of studies where we've asked managers and leaders a similar question, just in a bit more structured way. So basically, we ask the leaders to write down privately things that they're good at as a leader, write down things that they're not so good at. So they come up with a whole list of things, things that probably seem that are familiar, right? Real strengths, I'm good at empathizing, I'm good at problem solving, I'm good at teamwork, I'm good at motivating people, and real weaknesses, things they're genuinely not good at that, if we're being honest with ourselves, a lot of us can probably relate to. I'm not so good at communication, I'm not so good at time management, and so on. And then what we did was we asked them, just like I asked you, to imagine that they were introducing themselves to a group of promising new hires, and we said, now check off all the things that you would reveal in that introduction. And what we found was that 96% of people said, yep, I'm going to reveal my strengths. After all, I'm trying to convince them that I'm the big dog here. So 96% of people said they would somehow incorporate their strengths. But only 35% of people said they would reveal their weaknesses. Think about your own introduction I had you dream up just a second, or times when you do this in your jobs. How often do you reveal your weaknesses? I'm guessing that for a lot of you, it might not have even occurred to reveal your weaknesses. Now, is this right, wrong? I don't know. So we did other studies where we kind of forced managers to reveal their weaknesses, and fortunately they complied. So in these studies, what we did was we first, we got a large sample of leaders, managers, and we asked them, we randomly assigned half of them to just write privately about their strengths, the other half to write about their strengths and their weaknesses, and then we said, okay, in a moment, we're going to introduce you to a new hire. We'd like you to incorporate all of this information into your introduction. So effectively, half of these managers are revealing their weaknesses in addition to their strengths, and the other half are only revealing their strengths. And we have the transcripts they actually did it. Then what we did was we measured the employees' motivation. So we asked the employees, how motivated are you to work for this manager? And what we found was that the employees were much more motivated to work for the managers who had revealed their weaknesses relative to those who only focused on their strengths. So this was pretty surprising in a way, because we think that when we're leaders, we think we have to always project strength and we can't be weak. And especially when we're trying to gain new employees' respect, we think, oh, maybe if I reveal my weakness, that it's going to undermine my competence. So this is a very fair question. And so we actually ran lots more studies assessing whether does the benefit whereby revealing your weaknesses increases employee motivation, does that benefit offset by a decrease in perceived competence? The answer is no. So managers who reveal their weaknesses, they're viewed as just as competent as those who do not. But the ones that reveal their weaknesses, they're liked better, they're respected better, and their employees are more motivated to work for them. You also may be wondering, what about groups that are chronically underestimated? Women. I was very interested in this question, and so I ran this study with women as well, female leaders, and we found these benefits also were realized when female leaders revealed their weaknesses. Now, this is not our intuition, right? Our intuition, and I get it, is often we got to keep our cards close to the vest. We shouldn't reveal this stuff. But I'm pleasantly surprised every now and again I see leaders who actually have this intuition and they get vulnerable and they reveal their weaknesses. For example, Melinda French Gates, she's known to have revealed her critical feedback to her employees. Another example is the Intuit CEO who literally posted his 360-degree feedback on his office door. Speaking of feedback, that reminds me of another benefit of revealing weaknesses, areas of improvement as a leader. Work by my colleague Adam Grant, what he's looked at is the question of, as a leader, how do you get valuable, constructive, accurate, critical feedback? You might think, oh, let me just ask my employees and say, don't worry, you can trust me, I'm not going to freak out if you say I suck. Well, it turns out that doesn't actually work. Employees are very nervous telling the boss what they really think. But actually, in his studies, if the managers reveal what their weaknesses are, reveal what they're working on, this actually causes the employees to then be like, okay, I can open up about and give my boss useful feedback. So that's another benefit that has been observed. So this is a lot so far, and what I'd like to do is just take a pause here, and I'd like to do a quick exercise. So in a moment, I'm going to ask everyone to turn to the person beside you. Ideally, if there's someone you don't know, that's better. And just do a quick intro of who you are. And then I want you to answer a question. I'm going to give you a few moments to talk about something. Now, I want this half over. I want you to keep your eyes open, and this hap, close your eyes for a second. This is where you trust me, please. Okay, so you eyes open. Here's your question. This is your question. Half of you should have your eyes closed. Okay, that's what you're going to discuss in a moment. Should have, good, thank you. Okay, now close your eyes, people who just had them open. Those with your eyes closed, thank you for your patience. Open your eyes. Here is your question. Keep your eyes closed if they're closed. All right, now everybody open your eyes, and I'll give you a few moments to do this exercise. Introduce yourself briefly to the person beside you, and then answer the question. All right, how did it go with my own observations? Who feels like they got really personal and talked about personal stuff? Raise your hand. Who talked about their family? Who talked about their loved ones and their friends, including their family? So just by looking at the experiences, there was a lot more energy on this side of the room and a lot less energy on this side of the room. Think to yourself, and this one you don't just vote privately. Could get awkward if you vote publicly. In your heart of hearts, were you wishing that I had given you more time, or were you ready for it to be done? You're like, thank goodness this is over. So let's see the questions. Of course, you had different questions. This group, this is the question they had, and this group had this question. Now, it's interesting. So there was so much more energy here, and I'm guessing that these people, this is not a rigorous experiment, but I'm guessing that this group feels much closer to each other than this group. Yet, I'm also guessing that when you saw this, and I saw some faces, when you saw this group, the criers, that this was your assigned question, maybe you rolled your eyes a bit, maybe you grumbled, maybe you even felt a little anxious. And you're not alone, because it turns out my dear colleague and friend Alison Brooks, one of the things she studies is the topics that people are interested in. And it turns out that talking about, if you ask people, rank order how much you like these different topics, talking about what upsets you or what last time you cried consistently ranks near or at the dead last position. So people think that they don't want to talk about this. Yet when I asked you to actually go through with it, the story was very different. Maybe you felt a bit of catharsis, maybe you felt relieved, maybe you felt energized, maybe you felt less anxious, maybe you even had a few laughs. So now I think that half of you I feel badly for, because you might be saying, hey, I want my money back. I just got this lame-o question. I didn't get to connect. Okay, so in a moment, we're gonna do one more question for everyone, all right? So this time, I want you to turn to the person on your other side. You ready for the question? Here it is. Including ones you currently have. Just kidding. Everyone's like, is she serious? Is she serious? But she's a Harvard professor. So clearly, there is such a thing as TMI, too much information. We've all seen people reveal like cringe-worthy things. We've done it ourselves sometimes. Maybe can you relate to that feeling of, like, I call it a disclosure hangover, where the next day you're like, oh God, did I really say that? Well, more on STDs in a moment, don't worry. I promised people that we're gonna get to some juicy stuff in this talk, if we haven't already. But on the idea of too much information. So yes, there is such a thing as too much information. And we've all seen these umpteen examples of people on social media. This is a prime space for TMI. On social media, who this person was, shall I say, venting about her job, calls her boss a total pervy wanker, forgets that said total pervy wanker is a friend. He sees it, proceeds to fire her based on what she posted on Facebook. So we all have seen, maybe we've done it ourselves sometimes, cases where we've clearly crossed the line and we've just gone too far. I'd like for us to take a step back and think for a moment about, I know everyone's trying to read that hilarious response. And think about your decisions to share information. Now, sometimes we make these decisions so effortlessly and so automatic, they're like a hiccup and we don't even notice. Like someone says, how are you today? And we just kind of auto-respond. But sometimes they're much more deliberative, like, what am I gonna share on a dating profile? What am I gonna say about myself in a job interview? How do I tell my employer I'm pregnant? By the way, Harvard, I'm not pregnant. But these questions, we constantly have these questions, and big or small, fast or slow, we always are concerned about pushing it too far, right? So our intuition is, we're nervous, right? We feel very safe when we keep our cards close to the vest. And then as we push things, as we open ourselves up, we feel like it's risky, because to an extent it is. And we're really worried about going too far to the TMI zone, the too much information zone. And of course, we know there is such a thing as TMI. But what I'd like to suggest is that there's another problem. Now, this problem is given almost no, if not none, no attention in the public discourse. But it's a problem that's just as problematic as the problem of too much information. And that's the problem of too little information. So, on the same time, the good news is I think that we also vastly underestimate this middle wedge here, where by being a little bit more open, we can reap some rewards, like we've already seen: respect, liking, motivation of your colleagues. And so what I'd like to suggest is that our intuition, which is basically often, if in doubt, play your cards close to the vest, what I'd like to suggest is that the reality is a little bit more nuanced. The reality is that there's both legit problem of too much information, but there's also potentially just as, if not more problematic, the problem of too little information. And then there's great opportunity in between. And the more I do research in this area, the more I'm inclined to say that we can actually tilt things. We can tilt it a little bit. The proper default is not to be fully concealing. It's to be forthcoming, if in doubt. The more I'm inclined, the more research I do to see the benefits. I'm not saying there aren't risks. Of course there are risks, but we underappreciate the benefits. Now, as I said, I'm doing a real about face here because I started off the talk saying that I used to say, shame on everyone, we reveal way too much information, we make stupid choices with respect to our privacy. I'm a bit of a recovering privacy expert, you might say. And so you might ask, how did I get here? How did I get to this spot? Well, for me, if I was to distill it, one experiment really changed my thinking in this respect. So come along with me, I'll tell you about the experiment. The experiment is in the domain of love, or more humbly, liking. You gotta start somewhere, right? And so in this experiment, what we did was we had people make choices, which of two people they would rather date. And to make this decision, if you were a participant, we would give you 2 sheets of paper. And the sheets of paper it was like a questionnaire, and one for each prospective date. And so the prospective date had ostensibly answered the questions. Now, of course, the questions and the answers were rigged by us. We wanted to test some things. And so if you were a participant, you would see, okay, there are these 2 people, this is the response scale, and here's how they answered. Now, also, the questions are a little extreme, like this. The prospective dates were ostensibly asked, have you fantasized about doing something terrible to someone? Okay. Now, one of the people, prospect A, frequently, all in. Ooh. The other person opted out of answering. Who did people prefer? They preferred the person. This astounded me. Not everyone, but 64%, like a strong, this is like thinking of US elections and the margins that you win by, like 64%. This is like 64% of people say they'd rather date the person who frequently admits to doing terrible things relative to someone, like it can't get worse according to this scale, right? Relative to someone who simply opted out of answering. And I thought, like, this is a mistake, like, what is going on here? So we ran many more experiments with other populations, other people, other questions, trying to gain access to someone's email, and again, it gets creepier. Whew. I know, part of my job is asking, showing answers to creepy questions. People prefer this person. And there's those STDs again. Neglecting to tell apart. Oh, it's like, I just feel it's violating even like talking about this. People still, on average, not everyone, but on average, they prefer the person who admits to the worst possible thing than someone who very saliently conceals. Now, of course, you would rather date someone who's clean than someone who's not. You'd rather date someone who's virtuous, who's ethical relative to someone who steals and peeks at others' emails. That's not the point. The point is, this is a strong test, right? To me, this showed me that concealing can be really, really bad. So much so that you'd rather date someone who admits to terrible things relative to someone who simply opts out of answering or conceals. And so this experiment also told me that there can be redemption in revealing even terrible things. Again, I'm not saying that we should go out and volunteer our deepest, darkest secrets, But rather, this experiment revealed to me that concealment can be really bad and that there can be redemption in revealing. And so this experiment led me, of course, to think a lot. And I'm like, I've been saying publicly, ooh, bad at information sharing, bad, we shouldn't share so much. And then I was doing these experiments, and it led me to reconsider things. And I found myself reconsidering some of my own decisions in my own life, big and small, around whether to reveal or conceal. Here's one story where I found myself, I was visiting Berkeley, and love it there, and two esteemed professors hosted a dinner in my honor, which I was extremely flattered about, and so I was on my best behavior. I show up at the house, I walk through the Berkeley Hills, I show up, Stefano greets me, all smiles, he says, oh, I went to all the Berkeley markets and I picked out the best beef, and oh, dinner's gonna be so good, and I was so excited because I was hungry, I was ready to have a wonderful meal. And then the meal shows up, and to my horror, it's steak tartare. Now, some of you, this would be happy news for me, but I happen to really, really dislike steak tartare. I also don't like sushi, and I am ashamed of this, and I was even more ashamed of it back then because I know it's not sophisticated to not like these things, but there it is. I love junk food, love Big Macs, but I found myself in that moment, like I was trapped in that Mr. Bean episode where he unwittingly orders steak tartare and then he just tries desperately to hide it wherever he can. So I'm like living Mr. Bean. I did my best to pretend that I liked it. But then, in hindsight, I thought to myself, this is so silly. What if I just told them, hey, it's not my favorite thing? They probably would have been upset knowing that they were trying to impress me, I guess, and knowing that I didn't enjoy supper. And what if I just told them? Maybe we would have connected out of it. Maybe they would have said, hey, we don't like steak tartare either. We're trying to impress you. So these experiences may be, again, think more and more about the rich rewards and the downs of revealing and the downsides of concealing. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, okay, so Leslie, you've told us about, how revealing in some contexts can spur liking, motivation, improve feedback quality. What is it that drives these results? Why do you get these benefits? So think back to that exercise I had you do. Those of you who felt comfortable, who shared personal information, why did you feel comfortable sharing personal information? One word: trust. It's because you trusted each other. When we reveal sensitive information, it causes people to trust us. That's because revealing sensitive, often personal information is a show of vulnerability. We're essentially saying, I'm in your hands, I've made myself vulnerable. And so we're implicitly saying to the person, I trust you. And trust begets trust. So in turn, the other person is going to trust us more. And we see displays of vulnerability and how it elicits trust all in the animal kingdom. Animals just do it in different ways than we humans do. For example, like puppies. This is how I sneak in a puppy slide. Puppies, they show their bellies. That's how they show their vulnerability and get trust in that way. And so revealing personal information is kind of like the human way of, it's like revealing our bellies like puppies do. Now, you may be saying, okay, this sounds intuitive, maybe. Hopefully it's intuitively compelling, but you're a Harvard professor. I want to see data. Give me proof. You're speaking my love language. Let me show you. So we did other experiments where we have asked people about how their attitudes towards revealers versus concealers versus everywhere in between. And again, people trust those who open themselves up. So here's just one sample study we did where it was similar setup to the dating study where we asked participants to take on the role of employers. and to screen resumes, just as many of you presumably do. And again, we showed them, we kind of had this rarefied context here, where we showed them how 2 applicants had ostensibly answered a series of slightly outrageous questions on the job application. So here's an example of a question they were ostensibly asked. The prospective employees, and as an employer, you're deciding who do I want to hire. So one person admits to the worst possible thing. Their worst grade they've ever gotten is an F. The other person simply opted out of answering. Again, you'd rather an overachiever than an underachiever, but again, in this strong situation, you'd rather hire. In fact, 86% of people, this was a very strong effect, they'd rather hire the person who admits the worst possible thing than someone who conspicuously conceals, who opts out of answering. Then, critically, what we did was we asked them, who do you trust more? Who's more trustworthy? And 8 times out of 10, people said, oh, it's the person that revealed. And in turn, it's this enhanced trust that drove their decision to select the person who had come clean and revealed that their worst possible grade was an F. And now the importance of trust, I don't think that it's hard to overstate it in the world we live in, where interpersonal trust has been declining for decades. And you can see this is in the US, but global figures show a similar decline. And COVID has been no friend to this, right? COVID has made these numbers decline even more. And so when we think about, in closing, what I'd like to think about is one final example, which is something that that you may be wondering about me, because you say, okay, you've talked about some interpersonal benefits, but you're a Harvard Business School professor. Show me the money. How do I make money off of this? So I will show you. We did additional experiments. We've worked with lots of companies where these companies have revealed information, and we've looked at what effects it has. So imagine you are selling wallets. Imagine that these wallets, you're selling them online, they're priced at $115. Now, who thinks it would be a good idea to go ahead and write on the price tag, reveal, hey, it cost us $58 to make, AKA we're making a lot of money off of you, our gross margins are pretty nice. Do you think that who thinks that would be a good idea in terms of increasing sales, right? We're talking about the bottom line, increasing sales. Who thinks, raise your hands high if you think that this would help sales? I'm looking like that. Not many people. And you're not alone. It turns out 12% of managers, when we asked them, only 12% thought that this would be a good idea. But then we did the actual experiments. This time, for this one I'm showing you, we worked with the e-tailer Everlane. And what we did was we worked with them such that randomized whether the costs, we call it cost transparency, were revealed, like the variable costs to create the wallets were revealed or not revealed. So some customers, when they landed on the wallets, they just saw the wallets and the $115. Others saw this graphic or something like it, which said, hey, the leather cost us $14, the duties cost us this, the transportation cost us this. The total cost for us to produce this is $58.50. And what we found was that when we did this actually increased sales by 22%, uniquely of the wallets. So it was specific to when the wallets, the days when the costs were revealed, it actually increased sales. And then we did additional studies looking at trust. So we asked people, we showed them companies who revealed or who didn't reveal sensitive information, such as gross margins. And sure enough, customers trusted the revealing companies more than those who didn't. And in turn, they were more interested in buying from those companies. Here's one final example. Come with me to Harvard Business School, Shangri-La. And we did an experiment right on home turf in our cafeteria. So this is a cafeteria, it looks like this. And what we did was we did an experiment on the vat of chicken noodle soup. On some days, the chicken noodle soup, these are the control days, we just put, here are the ingredients, price, $4.95 for a bowl of chicken noodle soup. But on other days, we did this. We revealed the costs to create the chicken noodle soup. And then we, of course, measured sales, and we found sales increased 21% when the costs were revealed. Now, Again, I'm not saying companies should always tell everything to everyone, and as human beings, as leaders, we should not always say everything to everyone. There is such a thing as too much information. In the company context, I mean, you could envision many things you would want to keep private, like trade secrets, or if your cost structure is a source of competitive advantage. But these are kind of existence proofs that you can actually really, really garner a lot more trust from your customers by being a little bit more open and sharing the kinds of things that you might think you shouldn't share. So revealing fostered trust in customers, and in turn, it enhanced sales. And we've talked about other benefits, like liking, respect, motivation. And undoubtedly, there are a vast number of untapped benefits of revealing that are yet to discover and yours to discover. So one final thing I wanted to mention before closing, which is